Hi, everyone. So today we're going to be talking about audience, and this is one of my favorite topics because I'm so fascinated by people and the variety of people that there are all around us. Now, if you've read the chapter, then you've read a little bit about audience and why it's important and the connections it has to you. So when you're analyzing your audience, before you do that, you start by analyzing yourself. Who am I? What do I represent? What do I believe in? What do I value? And then you also think to yourself, what does my audience think of me? You know, when I was growing up, my mom used to always say, it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks, usually to comfort me. But the truth is that when communicating, it does matter what everyone else thinks of you. So what is it that people see when they see you? I've thought about this for myself for some time, and I would describe myself as a realistic optimist. I'm positive. I have a pretty decent sense of humor. I think that I am personable and I present myself as likable. Not always the quickest or the wittiest. I know those aren't my strengths, but I hope that my caring heart comes forth. And then what do I think about the way others see me? I think that others see me, in general, as a likable person who has others' best interest at heart, who is smart and kind. But I also think that sometimes people see me as not as intellectual as others, whether that's because I'm female, because I'm blonde by choice, because I smile a lot and I'm kind of bubbly, like annoyingly so at times. Not sure. I ask a lot of questions because I want to know, but I do think that some people have that perception of me. And it's important to have this in mind when you're crafting a communication. What does the audience expect of me? What does the audience think of me? Because that will help you understand how to communicate with your audience. Now, the first thing to remember when we're talking about analyzing your audience is that the purpose here is not at all to kowtow to your audience. Okay, well, my audience is this, so I have to make sure I present myself that way. That's not what we're talking about at all. What you want to do is figure out how your audience perceives you, and then decide, where do I put it? How do I get the most favorable reception from my audience? It's probably the best way to put it, right? So not what do I need to say to make them like me, but how do I get the most favorable reception to the message that I am about to convey? So it's not about compromising who you are at all. I don't need to stand up in front of someone and pretend I'm someone I'm not. I don't need to craft an email where I sound like someone I'm not. But what I need to do is to know what the audience's expectations are and to know how I should address them. What would be the strongest way of making my point? What would be the best tone to use or type of words to use? So that's what we're talking about today. Analyzing your audience and how really to appeal to them. So when we talk about analyzing an audience, a couple of things, and I'm going to get into a PowerPoint in a minute. I'm going to make you look at this mess for a little while longer. When we talk about audience analysis, it really goes back to Aristotle and his work on rhetoric. He was very intrigued by audience analysis and put a lot of stock on it. And I think he was relatively successful since we still talk about him all these years later. And so he talked about how we should aim for the golden mean, which is sort of which is the middle way, right? So your audience can be composed of all kinds of people. I mean, you might be sitting there thinking, well, okay, that's all well and good, but if I'm sending out an inter-office memo and this is going to all kinds of people in all kinds of positions, what am I supposed to do? How do I make these decisions based on the audience? And the audience is made up of all kinds of people. Well, you're absolutely right. And that's going to be the case a lot of times. Sometimes we're fortunate enough to have I don't know if it's even fortunate, in terms of planning it is, a homogeneous audience, one where everyone's kind of the same, at least in some way. If you're giving a talk for the day students at Furman, then you're giving a talk to a certain demographic in terms of age. So at least you know that's in common. If you go to speak at a meeting of an organization, then you know there's something that all those people have in common. Most of the time, you're going to be communicating with a diverse audience. So what you want to do is just try to find the middle. Okay? If we're talking about age and you're communicating to all ages, for your audience, really aim for the middle. If we're talking about a group of people who have a wide array of political beliefs, then let's go for something moderate. Okay? You always do want to make sure that you don't offend your audience. And that might sound easy, and in some cases it should be. It should be easy for us to understand if we're offending our audience because we're making comments that are sexist, racist, ethnocentric, ageist, ableist. We should know that. But what about some other things? I once was at a high school graduation, and the commencement speaker, because they had that at a high school graduation, came up on the stage, and within the first 2 minutes of that speech, he had insulted Protestants, Southerners, and Apple product users. And that pretty much took care of most people in the audience in one way or another. That wasn't the wisest. In fact, that was a really bad move. He thought he was being funny. He thought we could all joke about this. But no, not at all. I will say, as a native Southerner, you don't really come down south and then start making fun of us to our face. I might smile and ha 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 and say, oh, bless your heart. But if you've been in the South for any amount of time, you know what I really mean by that. And it's not bless your heart. So you need to be careful to make sure that you understand who the audience is, right? Likewise, if you're writing a professional communication for the office, you want to think about what types of words you want to use. Are you going to speak in high language, grand language, which is super flowery? Like if you think back to high school and you probably had to read books like The Scarlet Letter, right? That's written in very high, eloquent language. Sometimes commencement addresses are given in that level of speech. It's often reserved for, speeches from royalty or very high-ranking religious figures. There's middle speech or medium speech, sometimes called, which is more of what you should aim for in most circumstances. This is straightforward, easy to use speech, nothing super fancy schmancy about it, but also not totally casual. Because then you have low speech, which involves a lot of slang and jargon and cliche, and you know from the last lesson that we don't do that. So we want to kind of go, in most cases, for a medium. Once again, it's that golden rule, the golden mean, right? Aristotle's golden mean. We're aiming for the middle. You don't have to fancy it up because it's a professional communication. Just make sure that it's clear, precise, is controlled in its tone, and the tone means attitude, right? So it's controlled in the attitude you're using. And also remember to be mindful of offending others. As I mentioned last time, sometimes it's hard to feel the tone in a communication, because, especially if it's not verbal, because if you're sending a professional business email, you're probably not going to use emoticons. So as much as I love this one, right, or the one with the blushing cheeks, hard eyes, there's some worse you could use. Well, we don't use those in professional communication. So sometimes it's hard to understand someone's tone. I probably already said this, but it bears repeating. Most of us have received some kind of communication from someone within our organization, maybe even a boss, where you read it and you couldn't tell the tone. Am I in trouble, or are you upset with me, or is this just a quick chat you want to have, or something big happened? The worst is at a previous job I had when we would get an email that said, hey, Megan, could you come down to so-and-so's office this afternoon around 2:30? And that's all it would say. Well, yes. Can I prepare for this? And so I, of course, would go into complete panic mode, like, okay, so I'm going to be fired today at 2:30. Good to know, right? And it often wasn't anything bad, but it's hard to communicate your tone in written speech. So you can do it, however, in the words that you choose, in the way that you structure your sentences, and we'll talk about all that stuff a little bit later. Okay, I want to also talk a little bit about audience of different types of communication. So, and how that affects it. When you're analyzing your audience, you want to take into account the actual environment that you're in. So, are we in the office? Are you giving a speech at a convention? Are you at a convention and set up at a table just to make a presentation? Is this a networking event where you're just kind of walking around and speaking? Are you writing an official report? Are you in charge of taking the minutes, right? Think about the situation and the audience's expectations of the situation. What you really want to always do is think, what does the audience expect? What does the audience expect of me? And what does the audience expect from my message? What they expect from you is important. Be that, unless you think they expect something terrible. But if they expect you to be clever, be clever. If they expect that you're going to be solemn, be solemn, right? Your audience will listen to you more and heed your message if it's conveyed in the way they expected in terms of you. And then the message itself, what do they expect from the message? Try to meet the audience's expectations as best you can without kowtowing to them, without compromising who you are or what your message is. So that's why analyzing your audience is important. If you're sending an email and it's going to a specific group, craft that email for that specific group. The worst is getting a form email when you know that there was something specific that should have just been said, right? So audience analysis, important. Now, once you've analyzed your audience, what do you do with that? Like, oh, that's great, Megan. I've analyzed my audience. Now what? I'm gonna tell you. Let me share my screen. All right, so as we go through this course, we're gonna talk about Aristotle's 3 elements of rhetoric. And I wanna go ahead and talk about ethos today. There are 3, pathos, ethos, and logos. And what they mean, pathos is an appeal to emotion. We'll talk about that later, but that's like the commercials for saving the puppies, and it has all the sad pictures of sad puppies, and Sarah McLachlan is singing, "In the arms of the angel," right? That's a pathos appeal. It wants you to feel devastated, so get money. Logos is an appeal to reason that often uses statistics and graphs, or just is organized in terms of a reasonable pattern with deduction or induction. And so that's reason. You're appealing to someone's reason to try to get your point across. Ethos is about getting someone to like you. It's really about your credibility as a speaker. And to even begin with how to create your ethos in a communication, you have to know the audience and their expectations of you. So here are some things to know about how to appeal to an audience. So there is this guy long ago named Cicero. Such a fun name to say. And he just loved this idea of decorum. Before you begin to argue, ask yourself what the audience expects and then be that, because they'll like you if you meet their expectations. Now, the caveat there is, like I said before, if the audience thinks you're a jerk, don't be a jerk, okay? I would think that's common sense, but just in case. But what the audience expects to get from you, deliver it, okay? And they'll like you. If they expect you to get up there and speak with command, speak with command, even if you're still questioning a lot of the things that you're going to say. So you change your decorum to match your audience. Not who you are, not your message, but your affect, right? The way you are. If I'm going into a scenario where it's very formal and everyone expects me to give a formal presentation, I'm not going to get up there and be like, right? Likewise, if I'm at, what's that fantastic event? The White House Correspondents' Dinner, which is all about roasting and joking. I'm not going to get up there and give a somber speech where there's like one poor person trying to ha in the back, right? So don't change who you are. Don't change your message, but your affect, you can adapt is probably the best word to meet the audience's expectations. We see examples of this in politics all the time. I think about campaign ads when it comes to decorum. And I remember that when Nikki Haley was running for governor of South Carolina, she had a multitude of commercials, as they all do. There was one where she was in a factory and she had her hard hat on, you know, getting the tour and the goggles. She had many where she was dressed as we envisioned Nikki Haley. And then she had one where she was standing in the back of a flatbed truck with hay all around her, talking to farmers, and she had on a flannel shirt and jeans, and I'm like, oh, I see what you're doing there, right? So politicians do this. They adapt to whoever they're speaking with, and you can do that too. So that's decorum. It's how you present yourself to your audience. You also want your audience to listen. They need to be receptive, attentive, and like and trust you. So to that point, they have to like and trust you. So they have to believe what you're saying. I'll get to that in a minute. Be attentive, which means you cannot be boring. Oh, please don't be boring. Oh, right? Remember, they're taking their time out to listen to you. This is an hour of their life that you can never get back. Or if you're sending an email, you can't undo that, right? If you send an email and it's super duper long and full of big blocks of paragraphs, I got news for you, friends. Ain't no one gonna read that. And your audience has to be receptive. And a lot of that is about their perception of you. Okay? If they come in there like, I don't care what this lady says, you gotta know that and work on that and help them be receptive. So Aristotle's 3 essential qualities of persuasive ethos, which the argument can be made that everything's an argument, that every time you send a communication or put forth a communication, you're making an argument. I mean, even if it's an argument to inform others. One is virtue. The audience believes that you share their values, right? There's something in common. I'm coming back to that. Practical wisdom. You appear to know the right thing to do, street smarts. You just seem like a reasonable human. And selflessness or disinterest. The audience often wants to know that their interest is your main concern. The worst commencement addresses I've ever seen are when people get up there and just talk about all of their accolades and achievements and they never address students. And I think, oh my goodness, is this your speech that you just give on any occasion? Because it had nothing to do with where we are, right? It's not about you, buddy. It's about the graduates, right? Emails are like this as well, right? Is this email to make sure that, is it in everyone's best interest? Are you trying to let us know what's going on? Are you asking a clarifying question to make sure that we're heard? Or are you just sending out this email telling everybody how great you are and these decisions you've made, and now I feel like you don't really care about me? Right? Your audience needs to believe that their interest is your concern. All right, rhetorical virtue. You have to be careful when you use bragging, like I just said. I don't think I need to say much more about that. You can use character references to create your ethos, which means other people, brag for you or support you, provide reference for you. When you're giving a speech, one thing that you can do is expose a tactical flaw. So you reveal a weakness that wins sympathy or shows sacrifice for the audience. So the most famous example of this is George Washington gave a speech. I believe it was his exit speech from the presidency. Forgive me, gentlemen. He had to put his glasses on, couldn't see what he was reading for his speech. And he said, "Forgive me, gentlemen, for my eyes have grown dim in the service of my country." And the whole audience goes, "Oh, we love you, George." You can also change your position. If you're in a communication exchange and you've put forth an idea and someone else is coming back on you and you realize that you're not going to get what you want, and it's okay that you're not going to get what you want, that's fine. You can turn around. That's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of listening. And you can even say, you know, I see I would have really liked for us to do this, but it's not just about me, it's about all of us, right? And then you keep the audience's goodwill because it makes it look like it was a sacrifice on your part or that you're putting their needs first. Practical wisdom. The audience thinks you know how to solve the problem at hand. Aristotle called this phronesis. I like fancy words sometimes. Show off your experience, right? If you're writing a cover letter, for example, you want to show off your experience, right? What have you done? I've worked with people on cover letters and they'll say to me, oh, I don't like to brag about myself. Okay, I'm glad that you embody humility, but you must brag about yourself now. This is the time. If there's ever a time to brag about yourself, it's when you're trying to get a new position. So show off your experience. Tell everybody all the great things that you've done. Do it. Don't be shy about it, right? They need to know, they want to know. You don't want to walk away from a cover letter or an interview or an exchange with a superior and think, man, I wish I had told them about the time I did this, right? Know your worth. Have self-esteem, right? And don't think of it as bragging. That word has such a negative connotation. You're showcasing yourself, right? Because you're proud of your accomplishments, and you should be. You can bend the rules sometimes when you're communicating, and depending on who the audience is kind of the point there, but know when to do it and when not to. And then often it's smart to just seem to take the middle course. If you are engaged in a communication where where there's a debate or a discussion about something, you can seem to take the middle course. That's always helpful. So, I mean, we see this in politics when you have a candidate running, say, for president, and then they'll pick a vice presidential candidate who has more extreme opinions so that they appear to be more moderate. That way they can appeal to the moderates and to the base. I always like this example about getting your child to bed half an hour earlier. I've used this on my kids so many times. I want them to go to bed at 9, let's say. So I say, all right, kids, tonight, bed, 8:30. Mom, why not 9:30? No, not gonna do 9:30. 8:40. Mom, no, 9:15, 9:15. 8:45, that's the best I'm gonna offer you. Mom, please, 9. Okay, 9 it is. It's okay to make them think they won. It's okay. Everyone wins in that scenario. And you should use that because it's a good one. Okay, you want to win the audience's trust. There are various ways that you can do this. And this is more of when you're speaking. You can seem to deal reluctantly with something you're really eager to prove. You can act as if the choice you advocate hurts you personally, like, man, I hate this as much as anybody else, but I know this is the right thing to do. And I'm going to skip this one, but there are lots of examples in history when people have lost the goodwill of their audience. So these are some examples, and you just want to be like, guys, what were you thinking? Bad word choices. Bad word choices. Okay, so Cicero said the audience should be attentive, trusting, and willing to be persuaded. They'll be attentive if you're interesting. Now, that doesn't mean you have to come out there or put a bunch of exclamation points in your email or in your document, right? It's all about the details that you choose. And when you're speaking, it's about how you speak. You speak in an engaging way, right? When you're writing, it's about using interesting words and using specific examples and details. Trusting goes along with virtue, practical wisdom, and goodwill. So if the audience or the receiver of your communication believes that you share the same value within the company, for example, then they'll trust you. And then willing, if you're a role model, the essence of leadership. But if you're trying to lead the way from a place of strong character, right? So you want to make sure that your audience perceives you as a person of strong character, trustworthy, honest, and attentive to them. And then they will do the same with you. I'm going to skip dubitatio. It's just a fancy word. Now, I've saved the most important point for last. Let me figure out how to stop sharing my screen. I think I click here. No, I don't. Oh, there we go. Okay. When analyzing your audience and deciding how to proceed, you always want to look for what's called the commonplace. The commonplace is what you have in common. When you're communicating with someone, there's always something that you have in common, something you both can agree on. This is why when you meet people, you tell them elements about yourself and why it's so exciting when someone goes, oh my gosh, I grew up in the town right next to you. What a small world. Or you love Brussels sprouts? I love Brussels sprouts. Or, oh, that's great that you're working on that project. Our team is actually about to start on the same project. What do you think, right? When you find something in common with someone, there's a connection, and then you've got each other. And you can use that as the basis for developing trust and respect and all those good things. So when you're thinking about your audience, whether you're writing an email, whether you're writing a memo, a cover letter, giving a speech, an interview, research, know the audience. When I was going to move to Greenville, I was living in Charleston and I was teaching down there, and I wanted to teach in Greenville. I am not a certified teacher. My master's degree is in English, and so I couldn't teach in public schools. I knew I would have to teach in a private school. Well, the majority of private schools in Greenville are religious schools. And so in my cover letter, I had a line that said something to the effect of, I'm excited to work at a religious school because I feel like it provides a holistic education, not just educating students academically, but developing their character. And you see what I'm saying here, right? I know that that's something that's important to my audience because it's a religious school, religiously affiliated. So I know that's important to them, so I'm going to get that in there. And it's important to me too, not necessarily religious, but to develop the character of a person as an educator. That was always one of my biggest things. And so that was something I knew that we had in common, and I wanted to go ahead and put that out there so that they would know. I knew it was important to the audience, and I knew it was something that we had in common so that when we talked about it in the interview, I could talk about it authentically. That's important. Don't pretend to be something that you're not, but find the thing you have in common and be able to bring it up. Oh, hold on, let me pause. My child has arrived. Sorry about that. So when it comes to your audience, like I said, no matter what kind of communication you're putting out, ask yourself, who's the audience? What's the composition of the audience? What do I know about them? And what do we have in common? It could be that what you have in common is that you all work at the same place. And I'm not saying that in every email and every memo, you have to incorporate something you have in common with the person. You don't have to actually use it, but it's important to know it so that way your knowledge of what you have in common will come through in what you're writing. If what you have in common is that you both work for the same company and you know that you both believe in the mission of the company, then even just knowing that will help shape the words that you use in your communication. So audience is key. I could really talk about audience for a long time, but you've probably had enough of me at this point. You're like, give me something to do. I will. So I've posted a question in the forum. And also your activity for this week is a little different. It's not one out of the textbook, but it's one that I really enjoy. So many of you will remember, most of you will, back the magical decade known as the 90s. Talk about that for a long time too. I think that's something a lot of us have in common, having lived through that time. Some of you I know are much younger than me and you're like, yeah, no, but you long for it, don't you? Anyway, I digress. Back in the 90s, our nation experienced the Bill Clinton scandal. For some strange reason, you're not sure what that is, you should Google it before doing this assignment. I always have to explain it I always had to explain this to my high school students and even my college students because they just didn't know. So after, when the scandal had broken, and everything was out in the open, President Clinton gave a national address to discuss the allegations against him. It was not well received. And so about a month later, he gave another speech on the same topic in a completely different context. The first speech was given, teleprompter, him sitting in a chair in a room, speaking directly into the cameras, the American people. The second speech was given at the National Prayer Breakfast. Very different audiences. One, a national audience composed of the amazingly beautiful variety that is America. The other, composed of faith leaders. So what I would like for you to do, I've put on our YouTube channel playlist links to YouTube for both of these speeches. And I will also post text of the speeches, because I think it's a good idea to read along with him visually. Once again, I'm visual, but visually you can see a lot of the repetition that he uses. And what I would like for you to do is to watch both of those, read along, and then write for me an analysis of how he changed based on the audience, how the word choice changed, how the decorum changed. You can talk about visuals like the background or what he's wearing. It's all different, you'll see. Same event he's responding to. Some similarities in the message, but very different based on the audience. So take a look at that. Write up for me your thoughts on what changed with the audience, and then that will be your assignment for this week. And then as you are communicating this week, really start thinking about your audience. And if that's something you haven't considered before, consider it now. Now, don't overanalyze it. Don't spend 25 extra minutes sending one email because you're like, oh, the audience, but all right, don't overanalyze, but just pause and consider. All right, I'm gonna run. I can't wait to see your responses to this assignment. It's a goodie, and I will see you soon. Thanks, guys.